Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Cornelius Seed Podcast. I'm Juan, and I'm excited to have you here today because we're diving into some pretty timely and critical planter preparation. So now, if you're anything like me, there's always a little anxiety when you're pulling out that planter out of the shed, wondering if you've just got everything dialed in, right? So thankfully, we've got Doug Hauser, an extension specialist from Iowa State University's digital ag program, who's joining us today. Doug has been deeply involved in Iowa State's Planter University clinics, so he's got a ton of practical insights on how to get your planter performing at its best. So grab a notebook, or better yet, put this on repeat while you're prepping your equipment, because we're about to unpack some tips that'll hopefully set you up for the best planting season yet. So let's jump in. Welcome, Doug.
Thanks, Juan. Glad to be here.
Well, we're right now. There's been folks that should have their planter ready, and others that they might just be busy with other things. And so our goal was, what are some of those tips that we can talk to folks that are universal across most of the setups, right? Everybody's going to have a different colored one, and so we're excited to jump in and kind of recap this. And correct me if I'm wrong, you guys just wrapped up all of the planter clinics. How many of those did you guys have across Iowa?
So we had 5 across Iowa, and then we had 5 here at our new digital ag building. So we spent a whole week traveling around Iowa to 5 different events and talked to a lot of great farmers.
That's exciting. I'm curious to pick your brain. I was seeing that there's guys that are repeat visitors to these planter clinics, which just goes to show you the value that's there. And so we're hoping to bring that here today. Some of the things that there are many aspects of planting that have such a huge impact to your yield, and yield affected by good stand and things of that nature. It's all about getting that seed in the ground the right way in the best condition, and so planter downforce systems play greatly into that. Can you help us, for those listening in or tuning in, what is planter downforce and why is it critical for proper seed placement?
So when you think about planter downforce, you have to go back to physics in high school. You have to remember that third law, Newton's third law, that said for every action or force in nature, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And what that means in layman's terms is the weight of the planter row unit is pushing down into the soil is also pressing back that same amount of force up. So a downforce system really has 3 main effects, or 3 main goals for it. One is to maintain ground contact. It's basically keeping that row unit into the ground so it can plant at that seed depth. The second is to set the soil structure. And what that means is it presses out the air pockets and really sets the density, soil density in that furrow. And the third one is it creates a furrow structure. So it creates a great V, so you can actually put that seed right at the bottom of that seed furrow.
When I hear our team talking to folks, and they always establish the importance of that seed to soil contact, right? And so when you're talking about removing those air pockets, I mean that directly ties into that.
Absolutely. Any air pockets is going to cause problems. It's going to cause potential yield lags. And so you really need to get those air pockets out, get that soil tucked into bed and around that seed so you get the nice moisture around it. And so that's the really the goal of that downforce system.
What are some things to consider when it comes to adjusting downforce and
Absolutely, Juan. So when you think about downforce, there's actually 3 different systems that are out there on a planter. You could have a spring downforce system, you could have a pneumatic or air downforce system, and you could have a hydraulic downforce system. All 3 work really well. The first ones was the springs. Everybody usually have a spring downforce system. The biggest difference in all 3 of those systems I just spoke of is with the pneumatic and hydraulic down systems. They are connected to the monitor, so they're able to be adjusted electronically from the cab. The spring downforce system is basically you set a downforce and it's going to go across that whole field. Whereas the pneumatic and the hydraulic, it's going to adjust. As the soil pushes up harder, downforce system's going to push down even harder.
Mm. And have you guys, as folks that have attended these clinics, I can only imagine that there's a big breadth of folks that are either different tillage practices, right? So you've got some folks that are doing, no till and vertical tilling and deep tilling, etc. I can only imagine that there's different setups for each situation, right?
Absolutely. A lot of questions I get from farmers is, what is the correct downforce to put on a planter? And that goes to an agronomy answer. It depends. It depends on your tillage practice. It depends on your soil conditions. Is it wet? Is it dry? And so there's no magic number. It's one of those that you actually have to set and go out and take a look at and adjust accordingly to the conditions. You could have one downforce system you're using today, like last year. It was dry. We had to use a lot of downforce pressure to get that furrow structure correct. We had 3 weeks of rain. I had to back that downforce pressure off because it didn't take as much pressure to press that and keep that row unit in the ground.
That makes sense. Yeah, and one of the campaigns that we have coming up is as folks are planting, right? We really want to encourage people to pause, get out of the tractor, and go out there, dig and measure, and just our goal there is just to take a look at that seed placement and make sure it's consistent and it's going to the depth that you need it to go. When you talked about you have to essentially take a look at it, it reminded me of that because you get going, and especially if you're in those times of the year where you've got a limited planting window, right? Maybe it's been raining and you got to get out there, and hopefully you're not mudding it in. But sometimes it's hard to convince a guy to say, just take 5 minutes to stop the tractor, get out and take a look. Where I'm getting at with this is, what are some of those things that they would look for to make sure to see if it needs an adjustment?
I tell folks, one is, I know they don't like to stop, and so I'm going to have a helper or buddy in the field that's actually going to do this. But the first thing I do is I get the planter into the ground, get up to the speed I want to plant at, and then I stop that tractor, get out, and the first thing I'm going to look at is right behind the gauge wheels before the closing wheels. And what I'm looking at, and we call it the window, is I'm looking down, I can see that furrow before it's closed. I can see what that structure is like. I can actually poke into the sides of that structure, see what the texture, the firmness of it is. Is it too tight? Is it too loose? Is it crumbling? And then I also get to see where that seed is. It's sitting in the bottom, because a lot of times when I have farmers do this, I get out and I look, and there's dry soil on the bottom of that furrow, and then the seed's on top of it. That's not enough downforce. That furrow structure is not at the structure we need it to be, and we need to make a change.
That's huge, and thank you, because I think that enhances our encouraging for folks. When we're talking about that, we're making sure that it's down in the right depth, but we're talking about checking the wall, right, and taking a look at those types of things, which is huge.
Yeah, and so one of the things we do during Planter University, and the reason why there's a lot of interest, is it's easy for me to say. It's better if we can have the farmers come up and actually dig and actually check what we're talking about. And so in the Planter Universities, we actually have created soil bins. We actually run them through a planter row unit at different downforce pressures, and actually put them on sawhorses, and the farmers can actually dig, and we can actually show them, this is too much, this is too little. It's one of those things that you actually have to get your hands on and see it yourself before he says, aha, I get that.
Oh, absolutely, right. It's that touch and feel. There's nothing compares to that, right?
Correct.
Well, no, I appreciate that, and we'll make sure to link that in the notes. We know this one is wrapped up, but the extension website has just a lot of fantastic diagrams and images as to what to look for. And as I was getting ready for this, one of the things that we can talk about theory and what we believe some of these things should look like, but then whenever you actually put them into practice and then you start getting yield results and data, it just takes it a whole nother level. Precision planting is known for doing a lot of these studies, and they had one recently where it talked about they found that if there was too light of downforce, it would result in an average yield losses as high as 14 bushels an acre, right? Compared to the automated systems. Now, that wasn't encouraging go with automated instead of spraying. I think to me that just tells me if you're not stopping and checking, that can translate into some real dollars.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I tell farmers is a lot of them still have springs, which is fine. But are you, when you pull into a field, are you getting out and checking that window or digging and actually making sure that it's correct? It doesn't have the active part of it like a pneumatic or hydraulic is, but are you taking the time to set your springs to that field conditions accordingly? The spring planters can work really good if they're set correctly. But the problem I see is every time I hit a field, if I'm just running and not checking that, I'm assuming that downforce is correct for that field and field conditions.
And that's huge. And I don't want to be a dead horse on here, but we have, we're a lot of variable soils in our neck of the woods, right? So not every field to field is the same. Well, I think we've hit that one pretty good. Now, as it so we've got downforce and we're talking about getting that seed in the ground, but another big picture to this system is the work that the row unit is doing, and especially as it relates to like seeding depth. So what would be a best practice if you had to give one, or if you're talking to the group of people uh, to talk about just calibrating those row units for that seed depth, and if we don't do that, what is its impact?
So when I hear things about like calibrating the seed meters and other things, the first thing I'm going to start at is really the end. And that's what is the double disc openers? What is the size? Are they all the same size? There is a quick and easy tool where you can actually slide it up against the hub and you can actually check all of your double disc openers to make sure that they're the same size and the correct size. The reason why that's critical is that's your seed depth. Okay, that's getting that seed down to that right depth. So if the outside row units that's been running in the fence rows and other things is a different depth or right behind the tractor tires, that's going to make a difference in the planter depth for that one. So when I first start, I look at all those double disc openers, making sure they're down. The second thing I'm going to look at is the setting that I'm using for my depth correct across my entire planter? So I am going to get out, we're going to, before season, we're going to raise that planter up, lock it in place, and I'm going to raise both those or those gauge wheels and check the depth settings for all of the rows. Because too often I see that one row is maybe running at an inch and another one's running at 2.5 inches. It's all due to that setting. So I want to make sure that the setting is correct.
And that's something that a lot of folks could even do in the shop, right? I mean, have you guys talked about that at the planter clinics?
Absolutely. So at planter clinics, we use a system, and I'm not advertising for any system, but it's called a set and seed. So basically, it's a set of blocks that you're going to put underneath those gauge wheels. You're going to jack up those blocks underneath the gauge wheels, and then you're going to basically take that T handle, and you're going to take it all the way to the lowest setting. You're going to jack it up, and you're going to bring that T handle back down and check that setting. And you're going to do that for all the row units and check that. So we actually show that and do that in the planter clinic. That is so critical to make sure that setting I've been using for years is still the same. A lot of times what I find is I might have to go a half notch deeper because of the wear on the disc openers, and I just need to know that, and I'll mark that with my Sharpie and say that this is the setting that I'm going to use for this year.
It's funny you bring up the Sharpie because, so here at Cornelius, I do a little bit of everything, but IT is my main thing, and one of the things that I really enjoy about the planting season is I get to be part of the pit crew. So when Chuck or any of the owners come through and they're planting parent seed in, maybe they need to come hit the head. They'll pull up the planter and we'll go out there and we'll clean it out and swap seed and do etc. And so I remember when they were getting it out for the first time one of the years, and I see the notches all marked, and I remember just thinking, oh, that's kind of neat. You just kind of set it and you just go, right. You don't have to worry about that again next year. And they were just like, no, no, you want to make sure you're checking it. So the caution on the Sharpie is it's you use it doesn't mean carries through the next year, right? We all know that wear and tear can jiggle things around.
No, absolutely. And actually, I do a 1+, and that's if I get a rain event, and hopefully I don't, I'm actually going to check it mid-season and just make sure that things have not wore out more. So the other one I've worked with some farmers on is they don't like to jack up all the row units. So if they'll allow me, I'll actually take their planter out in a grass strip somewhere, and we'll actually set that planter down and actually run it. You can actually, if it's my sod area, I can actually measure that depth of that trench. So I like the first method better, but if fallback, I just want to see what the depth of each of those row units are before I put my investment in the ground for the year.
You said it perfectly. A couple of things right there. One, that is an investment in the ground, and we all want to make sure we're getting a return, especially the kind of years that we seem to be having. And then it's just it's the whole. There's lots of ways to check it. Just your whole goal and premise here is that we are checking it, right? Whether it's on some sod or on the ground or up in the air, take a look at them. Uh,
Absolutely. The other thing, sorry to interrupt there, Juan, but the other thing is the reason why I like the soil is there's another key component that we need to look at, and that's the closing system. So as I'm checking that planter depth, so I'm pulling it out into that grass strip, I'm checking all the depths of the seed trenches. I also want to check the closing wheels. The closing wheels a lot of times get blamed uh, for things that it is not responsible for. And so I want to make sure those closing wheels are actually closing that furrow from the bottom up. What that means is a lot of times those closing wheels get jarred around in the shop or out in the field, and they'll actually be just offset a little bit. And so I see a lot of times where one of the closing wheels is actually running inside the trench or just off the trench, and that needs to be adjusted so you can easily see it before you even start planting. Just put that planter down, pull it head a little bit, and just check, make sure both closing wheels are on the outside of that trench to be able to close it properly.
mm, no, that's a huge tidbit there, right? We're talking about getting in there and cutting it in, but we want to make sure that it's like you said, it's closing it and covering it with soil the way it needs to, again, to maintain our seed to soil contact. Um, there's you'd hate to go through and make sure you have things that are properly tuned in, right? Whether we're talking about our downforce and or even the depth of the seed going in, but now we're adding another layer of now the closing wheel, right? It's all a system that ties together.
Absolutely. And every year I get asked the question at our planter universities on, hey, there's a new closing wheel system out here. Should I try it? And the first thing I ask is the closing wheel system the problem? A lot of times when people are asking about the closing wheels, it's the last person in the operation. It's the last function that has to happen. And a lot of times the problem is ahead of the closing wheel. It has to try to cure all ills in the system. So if the furrow structure is not being held together, if its closing wheels are not adjusted correctly, it's trying to compensate and still get the job done. So I always, before I change any closing wheels or go to a new system, I'm going to look ahead of the system, make sure that everything is tuned and fine tuned as good as it can before that closing wheel gets to its process.
Okay. Well, no, thank you on that. As we go through and I think of things that I feel like we should adjust or talk about, one of the things that will get a person really to pay attention is to know, how does this tie into my bottom line, right? And when we're talking about seed depth, we've seen lots of studies. I mean, you can do this on your own farm or look at university ones or other third-party folks, is how seed not emerging together or seed emerging 3 days apart from it um, could be, there could be like a 5% decrease in kernel weight per day. And so I guess, all in all with that is, all of these things matter.
They do. They all add up. And at the Planter University, we actually have what's called a corn ear board. And we actually show the differences. So if you have your closing wheels not properly centered and doing the proper closing, this is the ears and the yield that you're going to get. If you have the seed depth not correct, so it's actually a good visual. But just like you said, Juan, best thing that I recommend to farmers do is to uh, have a small piece of your farm, 5 acres or whatever, and do some testing. Try just a little bit more downforce on a certain area to see what happens, how's the emergence of things. So all of us continue learning farming every year. When we start that seeding is a new experience, and so all of us continue to learn and try new things to better our bottom line.
Well, um, Doug, I mean, so many layers to this, and I know, I mean, even at the Planter University, I'm sure that you guys get a lot of questions that can probably take up a whole day, right? And I can talk to you about this a whole day. In still thinking about the row units here, there's everybody wants that picket fence stand, and we know if that will not happen if things aren't metered correctly. Um, what's the best way to make sure that the meters are ready to go?
Best way in my opinion, to get the meters ready is I'm going to take apart each of the meters. I'm going to look if it's a vacuum planter. I really need to make sure that vacuum seal around the meter is in good shape. So I actually take my between my fingers and actually feel around that seal. I'm looking for how spongy it is. Is there any cracks in it? I'm also, if it's a vacuum planter, going to look at the bowl. I'm going to make sure that it's in good shape. And so basically, I'm going to get all of that checked out and ready. I have to do that for every row unit. If it's a high-speed planter with a belt or a brush type system, I'm gonna check that out. So I really start with that seed meter maintenance. Really highlight a lot of maintenance things in our planter universities because it is key to understanding how things are doing and what needs to be replaced before the season starts. After that, I'm really going to look at what that seed drop looks like. Now, the hardest thing is it depends on what planter you have. If you have an electric drive planter or high-speed type planter, you can actually run that planter in the shop and actually check that seed drop. If I have a ground-driven planter, that's a lot tougher. And so what I'm really going to probably look at is make sure that all the maintenance is ready, and then I'm going to probably look more at my monitors and check and see what that seed drop is.
As we're looking at the seed drop, and you want to make sure you're matching that up with, like you said, the speed of the planter. Um, is there an issue if you're getting some doubles in there, or maybe a skip here or there?
Absolutely, Juan. So think about these skips is you've lost one potential ear to your yield. And so if you have a skip in your field, you have lost an ear to that yield potential. A double, think about it as two plants are now going to be trying to fight for the same nutrients, the same light to get photosynthesis. So they're going to be fighting each other on who's going to get what, and so it's going to cause competition that's not needed. Research data has shown that that picket fence where they're in equal spacing gives all of those plants an equal opportunity to gather both the nutrients and the sunlight and etc. that's why that is so critical.
Well, and this is exactly why singulation is such a thing, right? And why folks are paying attention to that on the monitors. And so, would you say this is one of those ones that is easier to keep an eye on, um, essentially through the monitor? I mean, you're not want to stop and dig and check that every time. This is a sensor type of deal now.
Absolutely, but I also go one plus, and that's I'm going to use a row unit holdup, whether it's a bracket like we have created here at the Digital Ag East, or I've helped farmers tie them up with log chains and straps. But basically, I'm gonna hold up a row unit, and I'm actually going to pull ahead. So if I see a row unit that's causing me problems, I'm going to hold it up, and I'm actually going to check that spacing. I'm going to check that depth with it. So the hold up of the row unit really helps to identify some of those problems.
What would you say if there is such a thing as the most common problem? What would you say that is
Yeah.
as it relates to those?
So the most common problem, and you take just a regular planter with a regular seed tube, what I see is trying to go too fast. Think of that seed tube, and it's got a curve shape because, again, of physics and engineering. It's made to run at 4.5 to 5 mile an hour. And what that does is when I drop that seed, it actually goes right straight through the seed tube without hitting the edges of the seed tube. And that's at 4.5, 5 mile an hour. If I go up to 5.5 and 6, what happens is when I drop that seed tube, the planter is moving ahead faster, and it actually ricochets down the seed tube into the trench, causing problems. So a lot of times the traditional planters, what I see the problem is uh, slowing down. Also, field conditions. If it's too rough, you can have a lot of bouncing. Think about it as holding a pipe in your hand and you're jiggling it back and forth and trying to drop that seed tube down. It's going to ricochet. So sometimes at a regular planter, I'm going to have to just slow down because of the field conditions, make sure that seed is dropping. I'll be able to see that in the open trench, or on my monitor, I'll see a lot of doubles, but that's usually the common cause on the traditional type of C2 planter.
Okay. No, well, thank you. Um, so we've kept this one kind of high level and simple on here's some of the key things to keep in mind to help you have that successful start to the year. I know there's a lot more, even as simple things as greasing components and chains and things like that. And we don't have to get into those nuts and bolts. One of the things that I've been encouraging folks as they're trying to work on these types of things is utilize the technology that you have available or your resources. And by that I mean, that can mean go to Iowa State University Planner Clinic. That could be, go through and look up YouTube videos or podcasts, whatever it is. But now a new one for me is leveraging AI. And in the way why I bring it up is because it can be helpful to get to there's so many things here in getting this planter ready that are gonna matter. And I just can't imagine how a guy that's worried about chores and maybe, handling a lot of the things in the operation can keep all those at top of mind. Even vets that have been at this for 30, 40, 50 years. So I recently put a video up there, a shameless plug for myself of just how can, hey, I have this JD 1700 planner. Help me get a checklist so I can go through and make sure I get it season ready. And all the things we've talked about are right there listed, top to bottom. So I plugging that in is, folks, use your resources, right? You're not alone in this. A lot of the times you go out there and try things out and things don't work, and it's nice to see what others have done and learn from other people's mistakes.
Absolutely. It's one of the things, and I failed to mention though, we didn't talk about how much is too much downforce. A lot of times I hear farmers say, "Hey, I did really good. I got my downforce is 100% all the time." And that's too much. In my opinion, 100% is like just holding it steady. So you get it to you hit a rock, it's gonna hold it in. So I got too much. So we recommend around 98% or 97% of that downforce margin is good. There should be some times when it just says, I need to come out of the ground just a little bit. So if you're running 100%, I'd have you really check that seat furrow and really consider maybe backing off a little downforce, because if it's 100% of the ground all the time, I'd say you have too much downforce. So really pay attention to that.
You know, and it makes sense because earlier I brought up one of the precision studies. Looking at it now here, it talked about excessive downforce, and a study they found was 5.8 bushels per acre as it related to corn. So there's that sweet spot always, right? And every operation, every field's different. So as you're going out there, you know your fields, and if you're going to head into that crest or something that's close to timber that might be a little bit more dicey underneath. Um, oh, thank you for that. So tying all this together, um, I feel like you can come back down to you know our planters now, and really for the longest time, have been collecting data, or there's been data that you can um, we've not utilized it as much as we should have been in the past, in my opinion. And I firmly believe it's because either there weren't tools out there to help educate people, but now monitors are a lot better, and they're giving you a lot more information. So where I'm going with this is, how can we utilize planner data, whether it's on the monitor or on field view or somewhere else, um, to help interpret whether it's singulation, spacing, downforce, population, kind of help tie this all together for us, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the monitors produce a wealth of knowledge for us. The hardest thing for most farmers I talk to is getting that time to look at it. And so my recommendation to them is have someone else uh, take a look at that, be in charge of it. There is a downforce margin chart. There's a singulation map or chart, and so making sure that we take that map and take a look at it. How well did I do? You know, for this field. It's a lot of knowledge that you can get, and it kind of sets you up to understand for next year. Uh, if we have the same type of conditions, this is what I should expect. So make sure we look at those, whether it's field view or others, the John Deere Operations Center, whatever software you're using, to me is not the most important thing. The most important thing is to use that data. Look at it. A lot of times a map will tell you a story. If you see a straight line in a map, more likely that's man-made. We've seen in the past where we could actually see our cultivation tracks in a field. And so I could see on that downforce, every time I hit that tra tractor tires of that cultivation, it would actually give me a red mark in that field. And so what that told me is maybe not my cultivation is my problem. It's not the planter. Maybe it's going faster with that cultivator, whether it's a bit of vertical tillage or others. Maybe it's the angle I went at, but it's causing me to have excessive downforce needed on that planter on these strips. You know, to be able to see them in those maps a lot of times.
And that's you said it perfectly, right? Is what story can it tell? And making sure that you're leveraging that information. And I agree, even with me, with technology, being part of my role, a lot of that stuff can be daunting at times. And you either want to wait for your kid that's away at college to come back home and help you figure it out, or know somebody. And so um, sometimes folks take for granted, or what I ask, right? Whether it's your seed company to help you out, say, hey, do you have someone there that can help me digest this? I know here in house we do. Janie will work with some of our seed reps and seed dealers to help folks just either whether it's pull a map or paint a picture, and you name it. So that's fantastic, Doug. Thank you so much. And one of the things that as we were close to wrapping this up, is that I was wondering earlier when we talked about the planter clinics, is what would you say is the most common question that you see consistently across the board? The reason why I ask this is because you guys are obviously covering a big footprint, and not every corner of the state is the same as far as it relates to soil or practices, or there might be more cattle folks, or there might be some cover crop people, a little bit of everything. Is there something key that you've seen consistently across all of them?
This year, the consistency I saw, there's a lot more interest in taking my original planter, maybe have the finger pickup, and upgrading it to an electric or high speed. And actually, discussions about capabilities. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What does it take? And so this year we had a whole section of the planter clinic to talk about the differences and how to get a electric type of row unit. If you choose your brand, is it possible for my frame on my planter? The other one that consistently comes up is, should I get a high-speed row unit for my planter? And when I talk about high speed, you don't have to go fast with a high-speed row unit. The nice thing about a high-speed row unit is it actually drops that seed right above the bottom of the trench. So it's going to take that seed all the way down and it's going to drop it closer to the furrow. So that really helps with that spacing. I can go fast if I need to. I got a rain event coming in, I can use it. But most of the farmers I talk to that have high-speed row units really are after that singulation, that spacing in it, versus going 8, 9, 10 mile an hour. They're still going probably 6, 7 mile an hour, but they really like that singulation of that high speed. So a lot more questions we're getting across the board, across Iowa, on electric first, if that's my first step, or what's the advantages if I go with a high speed type road.
Interesting. No, and I appreciate you covering that, because just me thinking it through is the name itself, high speed, right? And it just has me thinking it, so it's just ready for me to rock and roll and go quickly. I would not have taken into account that it behaves differently in where it places the seed, which is, as we've talked about, is optimal.
Absolutely. It basically takes that seed, and whether it's a brush, there's some brush ones, there's actually a cell one, a belt. It actually puts a seed into a chamber, and it's actually going to take it down the elevator, so to speak, or down the belt, and it's actually going to drop it right above that furrow. So it actually takes good care of that seed from the seed meter all the way down. And the other planters that have the seed tubes, it's actually going to drop it. The electric planter will drop it at the top of that seed tube, and it has to go down that seed tube. So it actually takes care of some of that bouncing. So if my field is a little bit rough with the high speed, it's going to say, I could have a little more roughness, and I'm going to take good care of that seed all the way to the top of that furrow.
I appreciate you bringing it up that way, because one of the things that we've talked about internally is how you should expect good seed quality from a company selling seed, right? I mean, one, you should be able to trust the label and how it's germinating, etc. But quality is table stakes now, right? That's you're paying that much for a bag, it better be good. Excuse me. And one of the things that we pride ourselves in is, all right, how do we distinguish ourselves from other folks? Is, well, we think about the seed handling all the way across the system, right? Whenever we're picking the ears out of the field, we're strategically dumping them into wooden wagons, because we recognize that that's going to be a different type of impact on what's a live seed, right? And so I think of every touch point, everything it hits can be a concussion of some sort. And so your seed quality should have such vigor and such strength that it should handle that quite a bit. But ideally, if you can remove any of those things out of the equation, it can only be good, right?
Absolutely. And you actually hit it right on the head there, Juan, is you really have to think the whole system, just like Cornelius is doing with their seed on the wood wagons. Same thing with the planting system is you have to look at the whole planting system, starting with the not only with the seed, but your double disc openers, your gauge wheels, and the whole process has to be in line to get that.
It's funny, as we're talking through this, and that rookie mistake of not silencing my device, there was somebody reaching out to see if I can help them make sure their software is up to date to start looking at all these things. So that's pretty timely. They must be excited for this podcast.
Absolutely, Juan. And you brought up a great one. And don't forget, I tell a lot of farmers is make sure that one of the things, my take-home message is make sure you check your monitor, your receiver's firmware, and also subscriptions. A lot of the monitors and things have subscriptions. I've seen a couple here just recently that are expired. So the last thing I want to do as a farmer is to get all my planter. I've shook it. I've checked all the bearings, the bushings, everything is in line, just like Doug said. The closing wheels are done. I get in and things aren't working because my subscriptions have expired or my firmware is old, and now I'm sitting at the end of the field. So make sure that you move up into that tractor cab, take a look at your monitors, make sure the firmware is updated, make sure your subscriptions are active and renewal is not due and ready for that planting season.
That is it's a great way to close this, and that's something that I firmly believe that anybody that's sitting here riding around or maybe as they're listening to this podcast while they're planting, you have said something here that's going to make them think, oh crap, I better take a look at that. And it's going to translate to real return and real revenue, and it's super important. So I appreciate your time for that. And that's a fantastic tidbit. Make sure that the software is current, up to date, and paid up front. Is there anything else, any final advice that you'd have that you want to make sure anybody listening, getting ready to start the season, that's just right around the corner, should keep in mind?
I think the main things that we've covered, and again, don't forget the closing wheel alignment. The thing that I'm thinking is planting season to me starts that investment for the year. I know there's lots going on, but I'm totally encouraging all the farmers I talk to is get that planter out, get it set up. If there's a problem that you notice right now, it's easier to find parts, to get help before all heck breaks loose and the planting season starts. Last year I was with a farmer and he got his planter hooked up. We took it out and we found out that somebody had backed into the last row unit, and that's not a good thing. So just make sure that you get that planter out, get it hooked up. I know sometimes it looks a little ridiculous because it's going to snow, or it's not quite ready, but I want to get everything hooked up, get it fired up, make sure that the row units are working and everything's ready for the season. Then I'll set it back and I'm smiling ear to ear because I know I've done everything I can in my capabilities to get ready. Now, Mother Nature and everything else will take over, but I've controlled what I can control, and that's getting my planter ready for the season.
You said that beautifully, Doug. Thank you. That's absolutely true. There's control what we can control, and especially when it means when you don't have to throw extra dollars at things, and your time is worth a lot for sure. So, thank you very, very much. There's a lot of really good resources on the Iowa State Extension Digital Ag website. Is there anything there? What's the easiest way to get to that, and how would you recommend folks find that?
Yeah, so the website is R2R period AE period IASTATE period EDU, and that'll take you to our planner resources. We also have monitor guides there and some of the tools of the trade to consider to make some of the things that we talked about today a lot easier.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time, Doug. I really appreciate you taking a moment to connect with us. And folks, anybody listening, check out the episode notes. We'll have links to everything that we talked about. And if you have any questions, or there's anything else you'd like for us to cover, don't hesitate to reach out. You can find us on any of the socials, whether it's X, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. Just look up Cornelius Eden. So until the next one, thank you.